Hi, Gene Burnett from GeneBurnett.com. This is my buddy Eddie, and Eddie's been managing chronic pain for a long time. How long have we been doing Tai Chi together?
I believe it was 2010. So
Okay.
8 years.
Oh man, coming up on 9 years.
8 years this summer.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Going into the ninth.
Going into the ninth. Yeah, and we've talked about your long-term experience with chronic pain. Tai Chi is one of many things that you've used to help yourself to manage it. But how did it start? When did you first start being in pain, and how old were you, and what did you notice?
For me, it had a lot to do with overdoing myself physically with physical labor.
Right.
And then which started to break down, my spine in general, I think.
Okay.
And then when I was in my 40s, I always come back to this because this is when I remember it starting, but I was playing tennis and made a swing, and something clicked in the back of my neck.
Oh.
And I guess I pinched a nerve, which I never had before that.
Right.
I mean, I had general aches and stuff.
Right.
But that put me in terrible pain for probably 3 or 4 months.
Wow.
Because I had no idea what to do about it.
Right.
And I tried to go get chiropractic and stuff and massage, but it was so acute.
Right.
That everything I tried to do was seriously painful.
Wow. And the pain is really draining, isn't it?
Got better, but I always felt like ever since that one episode, that the remaining effects of was mostly on my right shoulder and arm and right neck. That never was as good as it was to start with. From that point, there was always some kind of issue with that part of my spine and my arm.
So how soon after this initial, or this tennis injury, or that sort of period of time, did you start taking the opioids?
Oh, it was quite a while. I used to get them incidentally from my mom because she had a prescription, and I didn't have any medical insurance at the time, and that was part of what let it kick in for so long. When I didn't get it, I didn't treat myself for a long time, except with ordinary, ignorance, basically, or ignoring it, or having a couple of cocktails and stuff, just to make it go away temporarily.
Right.
And then you still continued working manual labor, which was not effective for pain relief.
Right.
It was too hard of an exercise, essentially.
Right.
And then I would get my mom and dad lived down the street from me in Hawaii when I was a coffee farmer, and it was very laborious.
Right.
So my mom had a bad knees and a bad hip, and she had opiates prescribed.
Right.
So I'd go over there and steal one,
Okay, all right.
And it worked. I mean, I felt better.
Right.
Another thing that started this, that was also part of the syndrome that came in early, was just the tightest grip through my thoracic spine. What are these muscles here? The lats, I think.
Yeah. Or the
latissimus dorsi would just be agonizingly tight, and crushing the vertebrae in that part of my spine.
Right.
So I was over muscled in that time of my life.
Okay.
I had been just doing hard work for 20 years.
Wow.
And I was tight.
Right.
And then I started taking opioids every so often, and that would give me relief. And then I met a woman who was just graduated as a massage therapist, and I was her first customer, and so I started getting full body massages finally on a regular basis.
And that helped?
And that helped a lot. And I also, through this person, I had practiced meditation in my youth for 3 or 4 years at one point, and let it go. I got back into meditation, Vipassana meditation, with a monk. He was an Occidental, not an Oriental, but he had studied over in Burma and stuff.
Okay.
And so that also helped because I think I didn't find out this till later really, but a lot of my pain had its psychological origins.
Okay, all right.
It was physically manifested, but a lot of it had to do with my instability mentally.
Okay, right. That makes sense.
That was, but even though I sort of instinctively knew that, it took quite a while to have that be a realization.
Right.
So I wasn't, but I sort of did naturally things that alleviated that, like the meditation, for instance.
Right.
It made me more even-tempered.
Right. And then how did you end up taking more opiates?
Well, I got, as I got older, another probably 5 years from there, I kind of went off and on. I was still physically active. I'm trying to remember when that tennis thing happened, but it got worse as the years went by, my chronic pain stuff.
Right.
And then I finally got some medical insurance, and that would have probably been around late 90s.
Right.
And I went through all the motions with trying things, some drugs first, and this tricyclic antidepressants that are supposed to help with chronic pain. Finally was able to pin my physician down that I had nerve pain, and at that point in the history of medicine, that's sort of when I think they started supplying the opiates as more regular basis. There was the theory in the medical profession was that you could maintain on a moderate dose almost forever, in other words, which is later has fallen out of favor.
Yeah, that doesn't work.
No, it doesn't really, but I took advantage of that at the time.
And you ended up with a pretty strong dose, right?
Yeah, I got a regular prescription, and then it gradually got stronger. My doctor, basically said thought that's what I needed, essentially.
Right.
So I started taking more on a daily basis, and I could function, but as most people know, that there's a diminishing return with opioids because you get a tolerance.
Right, and you need more and more.
So in order to have it be effective, you need a bigger dose.
Right. And you were on a pretty strong dose by several years into this.
By the time I sold my farm, I started taking the strong opioids regularly in about year 2000.
Right.
So for 3 or 4 years, I had my farm, and then I was trying to sell it. And I eventually did sell it, and there was a lot of things. This is probably true of almost anybody, but a lot of things were going on in my life. I was probably, I would have been in my early 50s.
Right.
And once I got rid of the farm and left Hawaii, and I had to leave my parents there, who were now elderly and sick, but in order to save my soul, I got out of there and came over to Southern Oregon, but I had a pretty heavy oxycodone habit, at that point.
Right.
And what happened was right after I got here, I had no more medical insurance because they didn't have Kaiser, which is what I was on to start with. And I had to stop using the opioids because I couldn't get them anymore.
Okay.
And at that point, I knew it was hopeless.
Right.
I wasn't happy with the fact that I had that kind of a habit.
Right.
It didn't make me feel good.
Right. So you had to quit pretty much cold turkey.
Almost. I tried to. They call it titration.
Right. Phase it out. Yeah.
Dose gradually, but I either didn't have enough of them or I was too used to the level, so that when I finally ran out, I had terrible withdrawal sickness for about 3 or 4 days.
Okay.
It was awful.
Right.
I mean, like no sleep, crawling
Oh
walls.
man. And the pain that you were escaping...
Seriously painful.
And the pain that you were escaping from, the physical pain, not the withdrawal pain, that came back.
Yes, eventually. But the drugs were out of my system. So for a while, I made an effort to see if I could live that way without the opiates.
Right.
And I started getting regular massage therapy and chiropractic.
Right.
Those things all helped temporarily. Many of those things were beneficial, but they didn't last.
Right.
The pain would always come back.
Right.
So there was an issue, among other things, of being able to afford that kind of regular care.
Right. Right.
Because it needed to be frequent to be effective.
When did you realize that the pain was not gonna you were not going to be pain free, and that you had to kind of focus in on a zone of tolerance?
Well, it actually took another sort of another period of lesser opioid use to eventually allow me to figure that out. That particular thing.
Right.
I got back. Had a doctor here who gave me the lower well, they're still addictive, but hydrocodone rather than the oxycodone.
Right.
And was using it on a limited basis, and it even then using enough when I needed it to do something extra, like riding motorcycle tours.
Right.
And then I'd be out. I had an arrangement with my doctor, my new doctor, to only get a certain amount, and then in between times I would run out and at least be able to see, how I felt without them. So then as I discovered, meanwhile I had been alleviating my psychological issues and was starting to feel better mentally.
Okay.
So, and that was helping. I was able to think more clearly about my state.
Right.
Gradually.
Okay.
So that partly what eventually came to the realization that I was never going to be pain-free, which was a key part in my recovery.
Right. Because you don't want to be numb.
Right.
Because when you're numb, you can hurt yourself worse, right? I
discovered and rediscovered that the opioid use, at least at that time, was still something that I would falsely depend on, and thereby needing to take greater doses still. That same sort of thing happened. Although it didn't get as far.
Right.
So
you realize too, like while you're numb, you can actually hurt yourself and do things that you normally wouldn't do because of the pain and the.
Well, and that was always, many people who have this chronic pain of some sort, it's depressing essentially because you're physically disabled.
It's draining your energy, right? So draining. People who aren't in pain don't realize how draining it is.
They don't realize it. No.
Yeah.
And I ran into that quite a lot, and it's easy to say, oh, you should exercise more or eat right. And I gradually started doing all of that stuff.
But it helped to realize that you weren't going to get better, to improve your mental state. Not better, but you weren't going to get pain-free, and you had to come to terms with the opiate thing and settle your head a little bit.
Either manage it or not use it, one or the other.
So now you've got quite a toolbox. How did you go from primarily leaning on opiates? Let's see. Let's list the things that you use now to help with your situation. You have Tai Chi.
Right, Tai Chi.
You have...
Tai Chi ended up being a big step for me.
Right.
Because it, like we were saying, it allowed me to achieve a level of function.
Right.
That was regular.
Right.
That was like a stable bottom, at least.
Right. Right.
Of physically able to function.
Right.
And that also, at that point, I was able to do more things. So it made me feel better mentally.
Right.
I felt like, at the same time realizing that I was never going to be pain-free, I also more or less realized that I could live that way with it as long as I was able to manage a certain level of it.
Right.
And that was a key part for sure.
Right. So you have Tai Chi. You have your hot tub. I bought one of those the minute I moved over here to Southern Oregon. Right.
Started using that right
away. On. Cannabis?
Yes, but strangely enough, I'll comment on that, but I never felt like that was a pain reliever for me. In fact, on the contrary, I had a feeling through my introspective analysis that it increased my physical tension. For me, it was an antidepressant, but not a pain reliever.
Oh, okay. So it helped your mental state somewhat, but it didn't really...
Not necessarily. It didn't necessarily make it worse, but it didn't really make my pain relief.
Okay.
Get relief.
All right. Did you ever get into CBDs and really going specifically for that? Oh, okay. So that's still an experiment.
It does have an effect. I haven't established using that as a habit or a regular deal yet, but I have noticed that the CBD reduces my chronic inflammation, which is another part of chronic pain. There's the nerve pain, and then there's the muscle, inflammation.
Right. Okay, so that's still a work in progress. You're still experimenting with that.
Yeah, but I have a feeling it from what I've seen so far, the effects are beneficial.
Are going to be good.
Yeah.
And then now you also take the kratom or or whatever they pronounce it.
Yeah, that's sort of another drug, in other words, but it's a little less processed than a synthetic opioid.
Right.
So the plant people probably would think it's a little less harmful. Maybe.
Right. Well, it has been shown to help people get off opiates. I mean, a lot of people, it's not quite as addictive. It's not, the withdrawals and the same. Some people use it that way.
It has a subtler effect by far, physically.
And you're still taking a low dose of hydrocodone here? You take like 1 or 2 pills a day? I
take a total of a 110 milligram pill.
Okay. So you're on a low dose of opiates. Yeah. You take a little bit of the kratom. You are experimenting with cannabis, particularly CBDs, hot tub, exercise, Tai Chi. Does alcohol figure into the picture as far as like a muscle relaxer?
I would say it's a muscle relaxer. Yeah, right. And maybe it's kind of a conditioned response for me because I was always a drinker. From a young age. And so it's a habit, among other things.
Right.
But it does affect how I feel physically, so it must be part of what I use as a tool.
That's a school bus backing up back there. No, you... Yeah. So,
but I don't think it's one of my more effective tools. Really.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right.
Because there's a level of toxicity that needs to be, undone.
Right.
Well, there is with opioids, of course, too.
Right.
Or anything that you use too much of.
Right. So you don't have.
It's poisonous, essentially.
Yeah. Boy, so you don't lean on one thing.
Well, that's part of the key that I've discovered.
Accepting that you're not going to be pain-free.
Right.
Aiming to stay in a pain dose tolerance zone and using multiple.
So I can function. That's my objective.
Yeah. To live your life. Yeah.
Right.
Not to be based around the
Not
pain.
to be, knocked out or obliviously pain-free.
Right.
The only thing I ever wanted was to be able to function.
Right.
I don't want, and I thought, that's why I tried everything I could think of.
Right. So, so you need to, but it seems to me there's an element of, as Marty was talking about when I was talking to him about this, an element of listening to your body, because these things can't be too automatic. I mean, sometimes the tub, it feels like the right thing to do. Sometimes it's a drink. Sometimes it's a CBD oil, or sometimes it's the pill.
And the time of day that's involved is also.
Oh, right. You got to listen to your body and the cycles and what to administer when from this toolbox.
Basic things like getting enough rest was something I didn't do early on.
Right.
And now I am able to. For a couple of different reasons, but my rest is much better than it was.
Great.
And that reduced my general level of pain.
What about, well, that's a trick, though, too, because pain keeps you from sleeping.
Right.
So you've got to balance that out. Oh, my God. And what about diet? Do you have a...
Diet was also ended up being key, but that was fairly recent. I had another physician. I changed doctors, and he got me into and I had heard about this from many healthcare people and naturopathic types, homeopathic physicians and so on, and even my medical doctors, that a lot of what was going on with me was chronic inflammation along with the pain.
And what in your diet was affecting that?
I probably, since I already used alcohol, it looked like I didn't want to stop. It looked like any of the other pure carbohydrates that, I used to eat a lot of.
Right.
Bread every day and a lot of starch, along with other vegetables and healthy food. But when I started to cut back on the non-complex carbos wherever I could.
Right.
I mean, obviously, alcohol's one of the least complex.
Right.
But since I didn't intend to stop drinking, I cut back on all the other.
So you moved kind of in a paleo direction a little bit?
Yeah.
Paleo. Not strict, hardcore paleo, but
high quality protein, a lot of veggies.
Right on.
High quality oils, and it had a definite effect, especially on this part of what I had going in the central spine, which was, I think that was one of the manifestations of the inflammatory aspect of it.
Right.
The nerves in the neck and stuff were also part of it. It was always hard to explain to anybody because there was a lot of things going on.
Right.
And that's part of how I got better, was to separate some of the symptoms from each other.
Right. Not just think of it as just one lump. Right.
And so, for instance, lowering my carbo intake had an effect on this particular part of my pain syndrome.
Interesting. So there's a lot of biofeedback involved in this.
That's definitely true. It
seems like
I sort of discovered how to do that accidentally.
As you went. Right. Yeah. Same with Marty. He said a key thing was that once he realized that he was going to be in pain and really accepted that and started aiming for a tolerable zone, then he just started a long period of experimentation trying things out at different times in different ways,
well,
and
that's
seeing,
what I did too.
yeah, seeing what effects, and not leaning on one tool, but having a number of tools, and also focusing on your life and the things that you want to do with your life, as opposed to just focusing on the pain.
Well, right, but which is gratifying and reduces your pain, but there's a point where you've got to break through the idea somehow, almost, that you can't function because you're in too much pain. You can function, and some of the things you can do reduce the general pain.
Right. It seems sometimes like you're driving on a highway and there's speed bumps, and instead of looking at the bumps, look at the highway and just tolerate the speed bump, but
exactly.
be moving forward.
I had to learn personally a certain amount of patience.
Right.
In other words,
Right.
Rather than instant gratification.
Right. You can't do things as much, maybe as long or as much as you want. You might have to do things in stages.
The patience involves many things.
Right.
I had to, in that sense, it's a matter of acceptance. That's part of the. Early in my pain career, I couldn't tolerate it. I couldn't accept it mentally.
Right. Do you break tasks into smaller chunks that you can do and then rest and then do and rest? Where you when you were younger, you would have just blasted through the whole thing. Okay, so part of the patience is to just take your time and do things in stages.
And realize my current limit.
Right.
Sometimes I wish I could do more, but hopefully no, I can't when I'm not able to.
Well, if you listen to your body and take it seriously and respect the signals you're getting, that's a lot better, I think, than just blasting through and treating your body like a slave that's going to do whatever you want.
That first half of my life.
Right.
Was pretty heedless of almost everything.
Yeah. Listen to your body and be nice to it. It's you, man. Be nice to it. It's not somebody else's body. Is there anything else you'd like to add, or anything else you'd like to share, or to communicate to people who might be going through a similar thing?
Somebody some insight into how they can deal with their trouble.
All right. Cool. Thanks for chatting with us today.
Okay.
All right. Take care, Eddie. Take care.